welcome to a special session today. We are once again joined by our partners with Northwest Employment Works. I've got Vicki Cheeseman here with me today again. I just wanted to put in a few plugs before we get started. The first is for all of our students in Mishkegogomang. We have staff up there doing a community visit today. If you are around and available, please feel free to drop into the Learning Center there to meet with them. If you have any questions about anything, you need any resources, they are wonderful contacts, but you've got Waylona on your side as well who you can reach out to anytime. Just please know that we're there and here for you. Feel free to reach out. Before Vicki gets into her new workshop that she's got going on today, I wanted to throw in a quick plug for a resume clinic that Northwest Employment Works is putting on. It will be next week, Tuesday, December 3rd to Wednesday, December 4th. It's a 2-day clinic. If you are following us on Facebook, or does Northwest Employment Works have a Facebook
We
page?
do. It's also on Sulocodarian events.
There you go. Lots of places to find the information. Reach out, register with Northwest Employment Works, check out that resume clinic, utilize the wonderful expertise that they've got there. And if students or not students, if you're just tuning in and listening, please feel free to access that clinic. Today, we are jumping into another workshop. The previous workshops we've done have been goal setting, personal management. We did job search. Our latest was a resume and cover letter writing, which fits in beautifully with the clinic that they're doing. Today is the next step, and it will be on interview success. So I'm going to hand it over to the professional. We've got Vicki Cheeseman here. Thanks again for joining us, Vicki.
Thank you, Kobe. Good morning, everyone. As Kobe said, please do check out our resume clinic. It's free to everyone. Will be refreshments, and you will leave at the end of day 2 with a resume in hand. So please do reach out to us if you want to know more about that. As Kobe said, this is the 4th in a series of workshops I've done. We started again, as she said, with attitude and goal setting, job searching, resume and cover letter building, and now we're in the final step that hopefully leads you to that perfect job, which is interview success. Now, going into an interview is a very, very nervous time for many people. Just try and keep it in perspective and keep in mind it's you going into a meeting about you, and nobody knows that better than yourself. So try to keep that in perspective and just relax. And got some tips that'll hopefully help you through the process. So what we're going to learn today is we're going to recognize some common interview pitfalls and how to not get caught in those. Understanding how to prepare effectively for an interview. There is a process to prepare. If you go in without preparation, it's probably not going to be your best outcome. Discover how to follow up after an interview. This is probably more important than any other part of the training we're going to give you today. That follow up is key and can make the difference in whether you're successful or not. Also, we want you to become aware of interview preparation resources. Of course, these resources are available through us at New Employment Services or the internet, Facebook. There's all kinds of different platforms you can use to find this information. But of course, if ever you're in doubt, just give us a call and we'd be more than happy to help you through it. So our agenda today is going to be in 3 parts. It's broke down to before the interview, during the interview, and the interview follow-up. All 3 of these are super important, but again, as I said, I think that last step and that follow-up is super key to being successful in landing that job. So the job interview yourself is a meeting. As I said, it's a meeting about you. You'd want to find out whether you're a suitable match for the company you're applying to and whether they're a suitable match for you. So the big question is there a fit? So we'll start with talking about the pitfalls that you may encounter when you're going into an interview. These are all great points, and please do be mindful of all this when you are preparing for your interview. Employers have noted that so these are some of the things that they haven't liked in an interview setting. Being too vague. When someone's asking you a question, they're looking for an answer with some substance to it. Just kind of grazing over it with a answer that doesn't really say much is not what they're looking for. But as per the next point, you got to be careful about talking too much. So it is kind of a fine line with giving clarity to your answer and just word salad. You don't want to get into that either. That is not impressing anyone. The way you dress. Dressing for success is key. When you walk in that room, they want to see that you're well put together, you're organized, you've taken the time to do that little extra bit just to impress them on that day. Obviously, they want to see that every day, but particularly in the interview, that you haven't just taken it nonchalant. You're putting your heart and soul into doing the best you can that day. Not asking questions is not a good thing. You don't want to overwhelm them with questions, but almost every interview I've ever been to or hosted, there has been a question period at the end, and always have something prepared for that. It just shows that you really are interested. Don't bring up topics of salary and negotiation. The interview is not the place for that. When they offer you a position, then you can get into that conversation, but it's kind of putting the horse before the cart a little bit. Some employers may bring it up, in which case then a conversation can take place, but don't instigate that conversation. Projecting a lack of career clarity is also a mistake you can make. Employers are looking for retention. They're looking for people that want to stay. So they're looking to hear that you have a plan for your future, and hopefully that plan is including them. Um, Absence of knowing about the job or the company is also not a great thing. Do your research. It's not hard. The Google offers you just a multitude of different channels to get information about the company. You don't have to know everything, but you should be somewhat knowledgeable. If they ask you a question, you should be able to answer general knowledge information about the position and or the company. Be enthusiastic. Lack of enthusiasm shows that you're not that keen on the position. They want to see that you're energetic and you're excited. And again, not following up. I'm going to bring that up over and over again through this presentation because it is so important. And finally, do not trash talk your old company or your old position. It might have been the most horrific experience, perhaps, but you don't want to go there with your new employer. It just sets the tone that you may do the same to them at some point. You can say things like that position wasn't a good fit for me, or that company wasn't offering, the future that I was looking for. There's lots of different reasons you can put as to why you've left a position, but avoid at all costs putting down your old company and or your old supervisor or manager. That's just not taken well by a new employer. So before the interview, you need to do some preparation. You need to know these main three things. You need to know yourself and your skills. We've talked about this through all of the workshops leading up to this, as far as the preparation and your job searching and your resume building. We've talked about knowing yourself and your skills. So bring that information back to the forefront. If you have new information to add, absolutely make a list so that you're kind of prepared for that when you go into your interview. The key things you bring to that position. Make sure you know about the career field and the job that you're applying to. You really should have that information. You can't be a good candidate if you don't know what it is you're getting into. And the employer, again, research that employer, know a little bit about it. Most big companies, especially, will have a website. They'll have their mission, vision, and values. Maybe you know somebody else that works there that can give you some insight. But it's all really important information, so you're prepared when you walk into that interview room. So, researching yourself, again, how well do you know yourself? You need to identify and understand what you're offering to the employer. That's so key. And you want to communicate that to them so that they're engaged and really excited about bringing you on board. You can make a list of your skills, hard and soft skills, which we'll talk about in the next few slides. Any experiences and qualifications that you bring to that position are absolutely relevant, and you should be prepared to talk about that and be in depth. You want to have your research ready. Have notes so that you're ready when those questions start coming. You're not looking for the answers. You've got that information ready. So, hard skills are specific, something that can be measured. Maybe you've had a grade of it, or you've got a certificate for it, or something that can be proven. Examples would be your years of experience, any education or certifications that you've received, any skills that you have. Maybe it could be artistical or musical, computer skills, languages that you know, any specialized training. It's all good stuff. So make sure that you have that information noted, so when they ask about the skills you bring, you've got some solid answers. Soft skills are a little harder to measure but are equally as important. Communication, I think that's kind of somewhere in between the two skills, because you can obviously prove your communication style in your interview and in your cover letter and your resume. So that's also important. But your ability to learn, how fast you learn things, your leadership skills, decision making abilities. There's lots of good examples here on the slide. Positive attitude, teamwork. These are all great soft skills, and absolutely are relevant to pretty much any position you're applying for. Now, when you start to layer your skills, take that one word and you can bring down words from it, and suddenly it opens up a whole conversation you can have. A good example would be leadership. From leadership, it can break down to decision making skills, prioritization. From there, maybe you're good at research, analysis, consultation. Maybe you're goal oriented, you're organized. All of that just comes from that one word leadership. So if you can layer those skills down, you can break it into a really great conversation that you can have with a prospective employer on what it is you bring with you to their company. Communication is just another example. From communication, you can be personable, you can be good at presentation, which can then lead to you're engaging, you're warm, you can develop rapport with coworkers, clients, or customers. Maybe you have great multimedia skills, you're responsive to an audience. So when you start writing down these skills, try and elaborate on it and get some great examples of what you bring with you. So next is, how much do you know about the career field or the industry you're going into? You need to do some research. What are they looking for this position? What are the hard and soft skill requirements for the job you're applying for? What kind of tasks are expected of you on a daily basis? What affiliations does this company have? Who might you be working with? Now, that could be other companies, it could be certain individuals, but you want to know that information so you're a little bit, again, prepared. Prepared is what's going to be successful. So be prepared to demonstrate your understanding of the career and the job you're applying for. Again, researching your employer. You want to know the history of this employer, their current status, what products and services they may make, sell, or deliver, what industry sector. Is it mining? Is it health? It could be education. There's so many, but you want to know a little something. You don't have to be an expert, but you want to have a little bit of information about the industry you're going into. Is the company a global, national, or just a local presence? That's all good information to have. And what culture and environment that you're going to be working in if you do get a position with this company. It's all good things to know. So, where do you get these resources? Where do you find this information? Again, the internet is huge. There's so much information there, sometimes too much information. It can become overwhelming. But there's newspapers, there's blogs, there's LinkedIn. I don't know how much, I don't use a lot of these resources myself, but it is out there. Places like Northwest Employment Works, magazines, career fairs are great places to go to learn more about potential employers, chambers of commerce, and just different professional associations. There's lots of information. Your public library may have information as well. And reaching out to people that you may know that already work in these companies or these industries may also be great resources. So there's lots of information, a little bit of legwork to get to it, but it's all there for you if you take the time to look, and it will certainly be beneficial while you're in your interview to have this information. Before you go into that interview, make sure you have an agenda. The employer certainly does. They're ready. They have everything they want to discuss out on the table, so you need to be just as equally prepared. Your agenda should include some points such as your ability to discuss your relevant skills and qualifications. Again, jot this stuff down. I don't know if you want to take your notes in with you. I have in the past. Some employers welcome it. But make sure you know it so that if you don't have those notes in front of you, you're still ready to answer the questions. You want to talk about your key experiences, your achievements, and your knowledge of the company and industry. I know I keep repeating on that, but it is so important to the success of your interview. And have questions ready to ask the interviewer. So that brings us to, during the interview, there's going to be all kinds of different questions coming at you, depending on the position and the company. But in my experience doing interviews, which is quite extensive, I've asked all of these types of questions at one time or another in an interview. First type is just your baseline questions. They're open ended. It's just basically a chat. You're quite often going to be talking about your skills, your strengths, your weaknesses, maybe your experiences. And then there's behavioral based questions. These are quite common. They want to know how you would react in a certain situation. So they're going to ask about past performance, situations you may have been in. An example of how a question like that might start would be something like, "Tell me about a time when," and maybe that would be, "Tell me about a time when you helped a coworker overcome an obstacle." And then they're looking for, what was that situation? How did you handle it? What was the outcome? They're looking for all of the detail from start to finish, what happened there, without going into, obviously a super long story. Or they might say, describe a situation um, where you had an upset customer. How did you deal with it? They're looking for your behaviors and how you would deal with different scenarios. And then there's the competency based questions. These ones are going to be tough if you don't have a ton of experience going into a certain role, because they want to know specifically for this role how you would deal with a scenario or a situation. So they might say, how would you approach doing a specific task? Perhaps if you're a waitress or something, maybe they would say, how would you approach a customer that has specific dietary needs? Or how would you deal with that if they maybe are lactose or gluten free or something, to offer them some options. You have to be prepared because that is specific to that position, and you have to be prepared for those types of questions. And then there is the situational or hypothetical questions. I've used this sometimes in instances where I have somebody that's new to the workforce and doesn't have a lot of those experiences to pull from. So I may put the question to them, if this situation was to occur, if you had an upset customer, how would you deal with that situation? What steps would you take? And then you're basically just using, the best that you can, what you feel you would do in a situation such as that. And again, that kind of goes back to the behavioral based questions. They're looking for what skill set you have and what personality you have to deal with different situations. So there is an acronym that we use when you're responding to behavioral based questions, and it's called STAR. And basically, you're looking for what was the specific situation, what was the task, what was the action that you took, and what was the result of that situation. So, again, that was kind of goes back to the examples we gave of being a waitress, and the situation was you have a customer that's gluten free. The task is to find other options for them, and the action is how you went about doing that. And hopefully the result of that situation is you have a customer that has found something that they're able to eat that's healthy for them. They're happy with their meal, and you get a big tip at the end. But just keeping in mind those points, the situation, the task, the action, and the result will help you answer those questions in the format that the employer is looking for the answer in. So there's all kinds of different types of interviews. Some are much more scary than others. A screening interview, I have been through this process myself. A lot of times that's for if they have a ton of candidates and they're trying to knock down the amount that they actually want to interview in person, they might do a screening interview. Or if they feel maybe someone's maybe not quite right for the position, they may reach out and do a screening interview just to make sure before they bring you in for an in-person. Basically, it's usually only a couple of questions, and it's designed to screen out inappropriate candidates more so than designed to select the correct one. I had applied for a job in another province, and that's when that situation came up for me. They did a screening interview to make sure before we bothered to do the travel to make sure I was going to be a good fit. From there, there's also telephone interviews, Skype interviews, video interviews. These were super popular, obviously, during the pandemic when people could not meet in person. Some employers continue to use them. Some are going back to the face to face. You just never know what they may ask of you, so you need to be prepared for that situation if it arises. It's a great way to still have that face to face contact without jeopardizing anyone's health or causing anyone any travel that is not necessary. There's the competency based interview. That's a tough one because they are wanting you to be very specific in that interview. It may be like a scenario they may ask you to act out, or they may give you a task that would be part of that position you're applying for. I did see it in administrative positions where you would do a typing test or something like that during your interview to see what your skills are and what your competency levels for the position where they're at. Panel interviews are quite terrifying, honestly. I've been on many of them, but again, just keeping it in perspective, it's really the same as having one interviewer. It's just multiple. It's just a little overwhelming. You could be sitting across the table from anywhere between 3 and 5 individuals. Typically, they ask you questions one at a time. Everybody's writing responses down. It is a little unnerving, but the flip side to that is with a panel interview where one person may not love your answer, the other two or three might think it's great, and there's a discussion surrounding it as opposed to just one person's opinion. You're getting many. So as long as you're hitting on some points with a couple of those interviewers, you still have a great chance, even if one person is maybe not on side with you. Group interviews, this is something I have never been part of or hosted anything such as that. I did do a little research on it myself to talk to you about that today. It's basically they'll bring in groups of people and they'll act out scenarios, they'll have um, situations going on to see how you would handle things. Like I say, those scenarios where what if this happened or what if that happened, and they're kind of judging you. You have to be a little careful in these type because they're judging you as a team player as well as a candidate. So as much as you want to shine, you don't want to overshadow anyone either. You want to show that you can fit into that group and make that work. Again, I don't think it's super common. I'm not entirely sure if we have employers in this area that would use it, but it is something that could come up. I think it would actually be a much funner way to do an interview, but you need to be prepared for just about any scenario that may come your way, and that's again why we talk about the preparation so much. If you are going into a Skype or any type of online interview, there's many platforms that you can use to do it, but make sure if you have to create an account, you create a professional username. Again, the I love cats thing is great, but not so much when you're looking for work or setting up usernames that others are going to see. So you want a professional username. You especially want to test the technology in advance to make sure you're not going to have any issues with your audio or your picture. That can make an interview fall flat before it even begins. So that's important that everything's working. I mean, sometimes things happen and it can't be helped, but do what you can to make sure that you are ready as far as your technology is concerned as well. Prepare your surroundings. Clean up and arrange a quiet, uninterrupted space. I have been on interviews where somebody's dog's barking and the kids are running in and out and the phone's ringing and it's really distracting. It's not great for your train of thought to stay on track with what you're trying to do, and it's just really disruptive to the interviewer as well. Also, keeping in mind that when you're on that camera, whatever's behind you is also on that camera. So you want to make sure that it's as bare as possible, or there's nothing that's going to be in display that you don't want others to see. There's also, you can use fake backgrounds, which alleviates that problem entirely. You can have the most beautiful picture behind you, or you could be fishing, you could be doing anything. I would try and keep it professional with just kind of a plain, nice backdrop, but do be aware of that. I have also been in interviews where, there's been a poster or something in the background that maybe wasn't something that should have been seen by an employer. So do keep that in mind and practice. As with everything, practice does make perfect and it does help take away the nerves. You can practice an online interview with a friend, you can record it, you can practice again. Again, being aware of your head positioning on the screen. We don't want to just see the top of your forehead or your chin. Like, we want to make sure we can see your whole face. Make sure your voice is clear and that you're speaking at a level that can be heard, and that you're not sitting in the dark lighting where we really can't see who you are. We want to know who we're hiring, and that's the point of going online, is so we can see you. So try and make that as good as possible, and always smile and make eye contact and sit up straight. If you're all slouchy and looking down, it's not the impression you want to give for a first impression with your employer. So, some common opening questions in your interview, and this is probably number one, is tell me about yourself. And again, don't be put off by this question. You know you better than anyone, but they are looking for your professional information, your education, your experiences, not so much the personal details. A little bit's okay. Sometimes it's entertaining and sometimes it's relevant, but really stick to the information they're looking for. Begin with a tangible time period and tell the interviewer what path you took to get to this current opportunity. Perhaps you went to college, or you took a co-op in high school. There's a lot of things that might have made you decide you want to go for this particular position. Maybe it's just something you're passionate about, but kind of guide them through when you decided you liked this type of work or you liked this company, and what the steps you took to get from there to where you are sitting in the interview that day. Your answer should not be super wordy. 45 seconds to a minute is probably lots, and only include the highlights of that journey. You don't need to give every little detail along the way, but you're using this opportunity to set a platform to build on throughout your interview. So, whatever you're saying here is super important because you're going to take that and elaborate as the interview goes on. I'm going to go through some questions that you might be asked while you're in the interview, and this is every interview usually asks for your strengths, and it is one of the hardest things to do is to promote yourself that way. It's for me, it's one of the hardest questions to answer is what are my strengths. So do think about this before you go into that interview and have some answers ready. You don't want non-generic skills, and you want to list your main skills first. I've got a kind of an example of how you can do this. This the three skills in this example are um, communication skills, organization, and decision making skills. And then you can elaborate from there, in such as specifically in terms of my communication skills, my ability to, there's an example, to generate rapport with clients and develop and deliver effective presentations to different audiences would be very relevant to this job. In the past, I used my communication skills to da 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 da. Maybe it's you use them to train somebody, or you use them to do a presentation, or you use them to assist a customer. There's lots of examples, but that's just sort of an example about how to go about it. You take your main skills and then you elaborate down, just like you do with those keywords of communication and leadership, and work your way down to a good conversation. What do you consider your weaknesses? Of course, that's the flip side. And amazingly enough, people seem to do better at their weaknesses than their skills, which is unfortunate, but I think that's our human nature. But you want to identify what weaknesses you may want to share with them as being something that can be trainable or corrected. You don't want to say, I have a bad temper or something like that. That's not what they want to hear. You want to say, maybe I'm not really great at Excel or Word, but I'd be willing to take any training opportunities that come my way or work with someone that could fine tune those skills for me. Maybe you need to learn more about the products or the services of the company you're going for. Those are the sorts of weaknesses that you want to use. Something that can be fixed or can be trained with time and experience. The employer is okay with that. They don't expect somebody to walk in the door and know every single thing and be good at every single thing. They do expect there going to be a process of training and just being comfortable in your environment. Be brief, obviously, but you do want to, and you be truthful. Don't make up something just to have an answer. Try and be truthful. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And again, it's down to preparing before you're in that situation where you have to answer the question. Why have you chosen this career path? Another super common question, and you want to again begin by identifying your experiences. Maybe it was something you took in school. Maybe it was something a service you used in the past that you felt very strongly about. Whatever it is that's tweaked your interest, that's where you want to start. Don't reveal any uncertainty towards the role. Employers in today's world are looking for employees that are going to stay, and they're very concerned about retention. So if you're not sure about the role, then they're not going to be sure that you're the fit, because they want somebody that's going to stay with them for at least a few years. They don't want somebody that could be jumping out the next time a better opportunity comes along, or what you consider a better opportunity might be. Add a statement about how your skills are a great match for that job. So if you're going into a job as a IT person and you have super great computer skills, make sure you're telling them that. Make sure they understand that you are ready. You have the skills that are going to match what they're looking for. What do you know about our organization? Again, I hate to keep saying it, but that goes back to research, research, research. It's so important. Demonstrate that you've done that, that you know the history, the mission of the company. Identify what resources you use to get that information. The employers want to know that too. If you went on their website and read their mission, vision, and values, they're going to be so impressed that you did that. And that is the information they want people to read. So if you're identifying where you're getting that information, that also helps them to put their company out there and have the information they want going to the right people. What are your salary expectations? Now, as we had said, I don't really think this belongs in the interview, but if the company does bring it up or the interviewer does bring it up, then you need to be ready to address that as well. So you want to demonstrate that you have some knowledge of a realistic range that your salary should be. If you're going into a union position, that information is absolutely public and you can get that. If not, maybe you might know someone that works in that industry to have kind of an idea of what the expectations would be. If you're absolutely unsure, I would answer with something like, I would like to make this certain amount of money, but what would you consider would be a fair range based on meeting me and my knowledge and training and experience, and then let them come back to you with an answer. Again, I personally don't think this conversation belongs in the interview, but if it is brought up, you need to be ready for that as well. So, a couple other common questions. What are your career goals? Again, make them relevant and hopefully long term with the company you're applying for because that's what they want to hear. Again, you don't have to promise your life to anyone, but you do want to give the impression that you're there for the long haul. You're there to learn and to grow and to be successful with them. As far as what do you think about recent changes in this field or where do you see this field heading, that's a tough question. The one example that comes into my mind right away is perhaps somebody that's looking at graphic design or something of that nature. With all the artificial intelligence that's out in the world today, where is that going to leave people that are looking for that type of work? You can just ask a computer to do a picture for you now. You don't have to necessarily reach out. But I do believe that these positions are there for the long haul. They're very important. It's just they're going to evolve with the way technology is changing, and that's just an example I can think of. There's probably many more. There's a lot more self-serve things, so customer service in some areas is not as strong as it used to be. So that's the kind of things they're looking for when asking a question such as that about recent changes or where you feel the field is heading. Um, so now questions for the interviewer. Again, at the end of every interview, you're going to get time. They're going to ask you if you have any questions for them. Don't ask superficial questions. You want to ask questions that you're actually looking for an answer to. You don't want to just be making conversation. Everybody's busy and don't nobody really has time for that. Have a few questions prepared. It says 3 to 5 on my slide. I think three is tons. But you want to demonstrate that you're familiar with the organization and ask questions that show that. So things such as, what opportunities will be there for me for training or growth within your company. Those are, maybe good examples of questions. The environment the company's in, what their direction is going to be, if they're expanding or downsizing. Those are good questions to ask. Again, don't ask about salary and benefits unless it's brought up by the employer, and be respectful of the time. Don't ask too many questions. If you know that you're booked in for a 1 hour interview and you're an hour and 15 into it, you don't want to start into a half an hour long conversation with someone that probably has something else on their schedule right behind you. So, do ask your questions. You're allowed, you're entitled to ask those questions, but be considerate of the time that you're taking from the person interviewing you. So, there are many inappropriate questions that an employer can ask you as well. In North America, we do have laws that protect you from discrimination and protect your privacy. And employment is not based on things such as disability, marital status, sexual orientation, age, religion. None of that is applicable in an interview, and none of those questions should be asked of you, and you certainly don't need to respond if those questions are asked of you. Now, keeping in mind there are certain exceptions if you're going maybe into a government job or something international where some of these might be applicable. So make sure you understand and you do your research on that if you are applying for a role such as that so you know what you do and don't have to answer. But typically, just as this information doesn't belong on your resume, it doesn't belong in the interview either. It should be based on your skills and your experiences, not on what church you go to. That is really not relevant whatsoever to the interview. So now to the ever important interview follow up. So important. Um, there's been studies that shows 22% of hiring managers are less likely to hire someone who does not send a thank you note, and 86% believe that if a candidate does not follow up with a thank you note, it shows a lack of follow through, and that is certainly not what you want to be putting out to the employer. 56% state it made them believe that a candidate was not serious about the job opportunity. That's a huge number. That's over half of the applicants could be potentially taken out of the running just because they didn't take that couple of minutes just to say thank you for that person's time. So it is huge. It really is, and it's been studied, and it is an actual fact that you really need to do that follow up. It doesn't have to be very much. It just has to be a thank you message. It's best to send it by the next day after your interview. All you really need to state is thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your meeting with me, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. That's really all you need. You don't want to be too wordy. You don't want to take up much more of their time. You just want to let them know that you really did appreciate that opportunity. And if you do not hear a response, I would say within 7 to 10 days to follow it with a phone call. Indicate that you're just checking on the status of their decision. And again, don't try and force a decision from them at that time. There could be other things in play. There could be a hiring team that needs to meet. There could be a manager that's away. Don't push it, but do ask. If you don't get someone on the phone, absolutely send an email behind it. Again, it doesn't have to be very much, just something of I left you a voicemail, just wanting to follow up on the status of your decision. When you have an opportunity, please let me know when we may be hearing back from you. Something to that effect. It doesn't have to be long. It just has to show that you are super interested, you're still interested, you're out there, and you're waiting for a response. And if you are not the successful candidate, try and be professional. I know sometimes it's very disappointing and you're upset. You've worked hard for that. I understand that. But you don't know. You don't know where you were in that running. You could have been that second candidate that maybe that first one might not take that job. You could be next in the running. Or perhaps another job will come up, shortly thereafter and you want to try again. You don't want to leave on a bad note with the employer. So always, whether you're successful or not, thank the employer for that opportunity. Ask them if you can contact them again and inquire if they can give you some feedback so that maybe next time you interview with them, you'll do better. Um, Perhaps there's nothing you could have done better. Maybe someone just had that little bit more experience than you. Maybe they think you're great, and maybe they might even be down the road offering you something else. So always, always, always thank them for their time. I have just a little video here. It's only 4 minutes long. It kind of wraps up what we talked about, gives you a few good tips on how to crush your next interview, and it just summarizes a little bit about what we've talked about here already.
There's really no better time than now to take your productivity to the next level. Grammarly is offering 50% off all Grammarly Pro plans for a limited time.
Sorry,
So going
commercial.
on a job interview has got to be one of the most nerve-wracking things you'll do. And so I want to give you 3 different tips on what you could do to crush your next job interview from an employer point of view, not the employee. Because I've done hundreds, if not thousands, of interviews, and I can tell you what worked and what didn't work. So let's get right into it. Think about the 3 steps as before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview. Let's first talk about before the interview. I, the employer, love it when the person wanting to get the job has done research on the company. For instance, I sat with a person the other day and I was interviewing them. They were hiring for a CFO position with our company. The amount of research this person had done was so impressive, I can't even tell you. He knew stories, articles, employees, leaders, challenges, everything. So I'm sitting there saying, this is how this person does research? Imagine if they work with us, how much research they're going to do on systems we need, technologies we need. This is very impressive. I like this guy. And so before him coming for the interview, I got an email on LinkedIn saying, my name is such and such. I noticed your job posting. I am really looking forward to meeting with you on this CFO position for this company. And we met. I was very impressed by him, okay? So step number 1, do a lot of research. Number 2, during the interview, overselling only works if you're going on a date with a girl or a guy. And by the way, if you oversell yourself, that relationship's going to be a very short sale. You got to be kind of honest about what you're doing with the business and who you are. So I sat with somebody and I said, how much you know about this? I have to be honest with you, I don't know a lot about this. But I can tell you what I know a lot about. Boom, boom, boom. What that told me with this person is I'm getting somebody that's going to be very direct, very honest, and they know what they don't know, they know what they do know. One of the guys I was interviewing, he said, look, this software I don't know about. These areas I am very good at, but with this, all I need to do is go to a 1-week course and I would get very good at this, because one thing about me is I'm one of the fastest learners I know, and I can't wait to introduce that to you. Good, I like that, okay? So don't oversell yourself. Be yourself and find a way to match the need with what your values and principles are, and what your gifts and strengths that you bring in. Match those two together. Let me give you the last one here after the interview. I had 7 job interviews I did last week that I was looking for, right? Only one of them messaged me back afterwards and said the following. They said, thank you so much for your time today. And by the way, this was the most qualified one out of all of them. How impressive is this? The person that's the most qualified, who has worked with the biggest account as the most qualified person for this position, was the only one that sent me the email. And he said, I just want you to know I really enjoyed our time together. I am the person you want. Not only do I want this job, I am really looking forward to this, because I can see myself bringing a lot of value to the company. I hope I get a chance to meet with you on a second interview. Regardless, I wish you all the best. Sincerely, ta-ta-ta. I said, you know what? Purely classy on a message like this. It made me, when we sat down as the employer, when we sat down in our board meeting and the investors and everybody was looking at everybody and they had already done the reference calls, they said, who were you impressed with? I said, well, the only person that sent me a note afterwards was this person. So I want you to think about it when you're going on your next job interview. Think about the before. Why? Because it separates you from everybody else if you do your research. Think about your during on overselling. Why? Because it gives you credibility with the person you're working with, knowing you're forthright, and there's not going to be any surprises. Because if you oversell and we work and we realize you were overselling, you get fired fast. And you don't want to get fired fast because it doesn't look good on the resume. And last but not least, on the after, send that note. Why? Because only a few people do it. Those 3 tips are the tips I got for you to go out there and crush your next job interview.
I really do believe the before, during, and after are all important steps, but always don't forget about that follow-up. Don't burn bridges. If you're not successful, take that information and use it as a learning tool. Every interview you go to will just make that next one so much easier. It's very rare that someone the very first time out of the gate goes to an interview and gets that job. If you do, congratulations, that's amazing. If you don't, just keep trying. There's lots of opportunities, and every time you do it, you're just going to get stronger and better at it. And you may not be the person who fit that current job, but things may change, and there may be other opportunities in the future, and I'm sure you will be successful if you keep working at it. I really appreciate your guys' time today. I sure hope that you guys are successful when you're out there looking for your jobs, and if ever you do need assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Eileen at Northwest Employment Works. That's what we're there for, and we're really happy when people reach out and want our help. Don't hesitate. Our phone number is 807-737-2851, or we can be found at northwestemploymentworks.ca. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Vicki, thank you so much for, once again, yet another superbly informative workshop. I appreciate it. You know I take notes as we go, and by the end you always end up answering most of my questions, which goes to show how thorough it all is. If I may,
Sure.
I do have one, because I did not know this. This is something that was new to me about the different interview styles. For sure, I've seen, I've heard, but most of them are situational. Like you said, a lot of them came up because of COVID.
Right.
We had to do these virtual interviews. Would you, and I don't know if there's a real answer for this, but would you, as the one looking for a job, be able to ask the company what kind of interview you'll be stepping into to prepare?
Absolutely. And again, I think any research or questions are good questions. It shows that you really want to be your best on that day.
Okay.
So if you're asking that question, I don't think an employer would be put off at all. I think they think, well, that's great. She wants to make sure that she's ready, that she has the technology she needs, and or she needs to be, ready to be at the interview at the time stated, at the location stated. So I would encourage someone to ask, and I mean, the employer should be giving you that information when they call you and ask you for that interview, but it certainly is an excellent question.
I know that our next get together is going to be about a super fun, and we'll get into that in a second here, but again, talking about that panel interview, how terrifying it can be just to mentally prepare. And you've reiterated multiple times that practice, practice, practice is
Right.
key. And so I wondered if, yeah, are you allowed to ask an employer, will I be stepping into a panel interview? How do I gauge preparation for that comprehensive interview, the competency interview, I guess it was called?
Absolutely. And again, I think all questions are good questions. So don't, if you want that information to prepare yourself the best way you can, just be careful how you approach the subject, that you are just gathering information to make yourself the best you can be for that day, that you're not trying to get an inside scoop onto how
Good point.
the interview is going to run. But, if the employer understands that you're just trying to be your best, I think they're going to appreciate that. I know myself as an HR professional, I would love and welcome questions like that because I know that person's preparing, and that to me is key.
Nice. We talked previously in other workshops about those buzzwords. You introduced an amazing, I never really thought of just Google searching buzzwords for the certain field or industry. Is there any way to gather a company or organization's maybe what their buzzwords might be from their website?
Sometimes that's probably a little bit trickier
Yeah.
but if you're going in and you're reading about the services they provide, and if they have a mission statement, there's certainly probably language within that you could pull from. Sometimes on their websites there's testimonials from employers or employees and customers, using that information. I think that would be a bit trickier. You're probably better to go to what the position is and what the industry is and try and pull those words from there. And then while you're researching and looking on their company, if you're finding that language being used again,
Good point.
absolutely write that down, because those are going to be words they're going to want to hear. But for them to actually have a section you can go to with that is
No,
probably not
yeah.
too likely. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no formula to pick out what
No,
it
you just use your best guess.
Yeah.
And again, with all that research, hopefully that you'll start seeing these words over and over as you're
Yeah.
doing this research too, and then you're going to know those are key for that field you're in.
Nice. All right, do we give them a little sneak peek
Oh,
at
I'm so excited.
yeah, can you speak to our next what
For
we're going to be
sure.
lining them up with?
For sure. We have some great new tools. We're talking about artificial intelligence. I know it's a scary thing for some people, me especially. I'm of a generation that this is very new to me, but there's some super great tools out there. We have what's called InStage platform, and it is a virtual interviewing. It can be done as a panel, it can be done as an individual, but you sit down with your computer, and your computer becomes the employer or the HR professional that's interviewing you. They ask you all kinds of questions. You can download your resume, you can download the job description, and the technology pulls together basically interview questions for you to answer. It's such a great tool when you're preparing for an interview. You can have the grouchy old lady rolling her eyes at you interviewing you, and the friendliest, nicest HR guy. You can pick from different interviewers just to be prepared for just about anything that you might encounter when you walk in that day. We also have another platform, and it is called Body Swaps, and you can use that for practicing so many, not just interviews, but it is great for the interviewers. You can have two of you sit down. One is the interviewer, one is the interviewee, and you can swap positions, asking each other's questions. It just gives you a feel for what it's like to be on each side of the table, and it is an excellent tool to prepare you for a job interview.
Oh, I'm so excited. That will be an added special bonus resource for our students, and I very much look forward to that.
Oh, me too.
Thanks so much for your time, Vicki. Appreciate it as always. And yeah, team, be prepared for that in-stage and body swaps coming our way.
Excellent. And when I do, after we do present it, you guys will have that for 7 days. You can play with it.
Right.
You can share it. If you need longer, we can resend you a new link, and you can have it to play with some more. It really is fun. We've had a lot of laughs in our office doing different interviews, and it's a great tool. So I look forward to that as well. Again, thanks, Kobe, and thanks everyone for listening today.
Awesome. Take care.